you've not got too wet with the old storms that we've had just recently. So as I say, this is it's great to have so many of you here, and today we're talking about how to develop a virtual high performance culture, because we know times have changed, everything's been moving on, and it is now time to think about how we can do things differently. So if you've been on a webinar with myself before, just letting you know that as you join, my colleague Helen's in the background, so she is going to put you on mute, because unfortunately it's too many people to allow everybody to speak, and it would just take too long, and it would go way into your afternoon. But what I would love is if we can make it as interactive as possible. So I'll introduce myself, but in the meantime, if you'd like to introduce yourselves in the chat, just particularly if you've come on and you're one of the people that perhaps your name is a bit of a code name when you join in, because I will respond to you as much as possible. I can't always respond to everything I see in the chat, because frankly it's just a bit too much for me to multitask with, but I'll try as much as possible. So do introduce yourselves in the chat, tell us who you are, maybe tell us the sort of business you're from, and also it's really helpful for me to know the sort of role that you do. Are you a people professional like HR, L&D, OD, or are you a line manager? Because I've been running more and more programs lately that are also suitable for line managers, so it's quite helpful for me to have an idea of the sort of roles you're doing. So my background, many of you who've joined before will know that I've did far too many years, I've stopped saying how many, in corporate learning and organisational development roles. My passion is OD because I'm a chartered psychologist, and I've always been really interested in the interaction between people, performance and organisations. I founded and I run business called Actus Performance Management Software. Great to see some of our clients on here, and great to see some of you as repeat webinar attendees, so you're most welcome. If you haven't come across it, I also host the HR Uprising Podcast. We're coming up for our 70th episode, and we've had some great new series of episodes recently, which is all about real life people professionals. So not just the superstars that we see everywhere. I'm not saying they're not superstars, it's just the unsung superstars. So do check out that if you ever listen to podcasts, or even if you don't, you might enjoy it. I'm proud to say that I recently launched a book called How to Be a Change Superhero, and I'll talk a little bit more about it at the end. And the rest of it you can see. I'm a mum of two. I've just managed to kick my kids off, thankfully, who are making far too much noise in the background. And I'd love it if you want to hook up with me, link in with me, join up on of my social networks so that we can be connected. And my details are there, and I'll put them up at the end. Great to see someone from Oxford City Council, who's one of our clients. And Oliver, Ian, nice to see you too. So hi guys, I'll try not to get too distracted by the chat, as I said, and I'll move on and keep things moving. Feel free to tuck into your lunch. I haven't had mine yet, as we go through this. So the purpose of this is to focus on performance from a high or low performance culture. I'm going to reflect on some evidence about what drives high performance, which is based on an evidence review that we did a couple of years ago now. Anything that I refer to, we are recording this meeting, and we will automatically send out the slides to you, so you can use them if there's anything of use to you, and we will send out the recording of the meeting. I will run some polls as we go through this, because the polling data is become really, really useful for us to get a sense of what the challenges are for people, and I'll share some previous poll data with you to help us really see, we're in a changing environment that's changing day by day, certainly week by week, and you guys, the information that you share will also help us inform the sort of webinars that I'm building going forwards. So we'll look at how performance in a virtual setting may be different, and as ever I will try my hardest to make it as practical and useful, so there's some takeaways that you can take from this. So before we do that, and I'll share what the research review says, let's get you to think about, what do you think personally helps you to achieve high performance? So put it in the chat, whatever you think it is. What makes you more likely to give of your best at work? Really interested to hear your ideas before I sort of preempt it and say what the official answers are. Let's see whether you agree with what the research review said and what previous people said. So don't be shy. I know for me, what helps me drive high performance is when I have clarity about what I want to achieve. That's really important to me. I need to know what I'm trying to achieve, and that gives me a bit of inspiration. Love this. So Sarah, we're on the same page there. Clarity of vision, connection to my team, and the right tools. Joan says trust, really important. Autonomy. So not having people bring no trust is coming through, and that's very interesting. I think that's been so important within lockdown. Targets, so clarity of targets, varied challenging work, recognition, so managers, what people say, individual, team and organizational North Star stars. That's a nice term, Denise. I'm imagining that is the sort of the top vision. Colin, to focus only on the topic. Does that mean not having distractions? Interested in what you're saying there. So great, trust, recognition, involvement, if you love what you do. So finding meaning in your work. So that definitely, I mean, having a goal that's something that I don't want to do, for example, run a marathon. I know that's not work related. That wouldn't really help me achieve high performance. But yes, I love it when I think, okay, I've got to get something written and I want to do it by a certain deadline. That will really help bring the best out of me because I'm motivated to do it. What's in it for me, says Denise. So great. Do feel free to say those things. That's great in terms of what you're saying. Trust and consistent engagement. It's interesting to see that term keep on coming through. And it is something we've heard previously in terms of what gets there, and reinforcement and support from your team. So I'm going to share with you what came out of a research review. I just pushed too many buttons there, but it doesn't matter too much actually. I'll just quickly take back. So the research review information I'm going to just benchmark this against came from, we asked a psychologist called Nuno de Camaro about 3 years ago to take a look at the evidence that was out there in various psychological journals, and he did a full research review, and it went back over about 40 years worth of evidence. And actually it would stand to reason that that hasn't gone out of the window, I'm pleased to say, but without a shadow of a doubt, we need to tweak it if we're going to adapt to the requirements of this current workplace, which let's face it, it's not going to just revert back to how it was. So although the research is a little bit dated, I guess, it isn't that dated, as in it's the last 40 odd years, and things have not changed tremendously. But that said, I will share up-to-date information as well. Empowerment, says Emma. Absolutely agree. So according to the literature, the key things that generated high performance, and I saw all of these actually come through in what you were saying earlier. Goal setting, clarity of goal. That is so important. And the evidence is that having a stretching but achievable goal is more motivational than one that is easy. The SMART acronym we've all heard of, and if you ever say it to managers, go, oh yeah, I've heard of SMART, and they kind of assume that they can do it because they know the acronym, but actually a truly SMART objective is fairly tricky to develop, and you can always make them smarter. So there are other acronyms, but I wouldn't, just because it's been around a long time, undermine how important having clear goals, many of you said that, are very important. But one of the things that came through from the literature, and they said they could not emphasize enough how important it was the importance of having regular feedback and recognition against those goals. Now, when we think about how we've gone through lockdown, I will talk more about this later, my recommendation from day one, and I think it has been when we've been talking on these webinars to people, what has been stepped up is goals which are annual or even quarterly were a bit too long term. When we've been working remotely, we've really had to stay connected with those we're working with, and those goals need to be chunked down into smaller term objectives, and getting that regular feedback. Is this still relevant? The climate is changing all the time. So those are still the top runners. Those are the things that you've said, and I completely agree with that. Now, there's other ones here, if I look at this, which is maybe things like, I'll come back to transparent communication and the reward thing, because that's much more at an organizational level, but I've left it in because this particular webinar is about culture. So I know that I've got, from what you said earlier, a number of people who are in people management roles or people professionals. So you will have a level of responsibility for culture. But you may also have responsibility for developing line managers, even though you might be a line manager yourself. And this was saying that things like coaching and development, this was critical because they needed managers to be able to coach people to take ownership, to empower people to take ownership for their own development, and again, coaching people to have the right objectives. So many of you in the chat said empowerment, and to feel empowered, you either have very clear objectives and you're very, very independent and you're comfortable on your own, going off and being independent, so you've got a level of autonomy, or you need a line manager to coach you so you feel empowered. You've got clarity of where you're going, and you know that you've agreed together what it is you need to do, but you've taken ownership because it was your ideas as opposed to it was dictated to you. Now, we know that managers coach, and they go on to say trained managers. I left it in as this because really what this is talking about is managers that have good people and performance management skills. But in the research, it came through as an ILM, Institute of Leadership and Management study, had said that something like 67% of organizations had stated that they didn't think their managers had the skills to manage effectively. And this is 5-10 years ago. Yet only 37% of them were investing in developing their managers. So for me, this does say that if we want to generate high performance in a remote environment, we are going to have to upskill our line managers. And if they didn't have the skills when it was face to face, personally, I believe the skills are that much more subtle. The people skills that are required are higher than they were when you had people just sitting next to you. So that gap is only going to get bigger, in my opinion. So generating high performance culture, we do need this focus on developing our line managers, giving them the skills to set goals, give recognition, feedback, coaching and development. And out of that, if they are consistent, they will build a climate of trust. We know that trust is really easy. The businesses that did well and didn't do well during lockdown, a lot of it was down to whether line managers were micromanaging, and micromanagement suggests you don't trust people, or whether they were working and empowering people and saying, okay, just do the best you can. I appreciate you've got kids at your ankles. It was about, but please, I trust you to get the job done to the best of your ability under the circumstances. Trust, really, really key. So then other things about transparent communication. In any point of change, transparency of communication is really important. And this point about reward for performance, that is an interesting one. I think the jury's been in and out on this, but certainly there is a level of evidence that shows that high performers want to feel that they are rewarded for their performance. And also people want to feel that poor performance is dealt with, is being addressed constructively. And it needs to be something that's done in a consistent way. So this transparency and openness, again, you can see how that links with trust. So I don't think there's anything, or does anyone do think, yes, acknowledge, Giles, I think that's a really good point. This in the literature, the studies they were looking at, you've got to bear in mind that the academic literature doesn't always reflect what we want to know in business, because it depends what they'll get funding for to be identified. But certainly many people would say that recognition has just as much value as financial reward, and reward doesn't have to be financial. Reward could be a well done, a thank you, a status increase. It could also be development. So it's about really what that person perceives as a reward. Absolutely, Alan. All of those are relevant. But also people will complain about reward. It's an interesting conversation, actually. The guy I was talking to yesterday on the HR Uprising podcast, that'll come out in a couple of weeks, is a reward specialist, and there's lots involved here. But one of the things that he felt really strongly about is if you do some sort of reward and recognition scheme, it's got to be seen as fair. And that's the main thing. If people have something that's done that is unfair, it'll actually be counterproductive. Completely, Diane. Insincere thank you. There's nothing worse than that. In actual fact, that's a demotivator. That sounds great, Giles, that you guys are giving other ways of reward, additional days leave for their efforts. It doesn't have to be financial. It's about doing what you can do under the circumstances, and not everyone can afford at the moment either to give monetary reward. This image here was me pulling those together in a way that I'd see this is how you might link this to a high performance culture. And I've done other webinars on things that are more sort of about strategy. But if you're trying to make the case, let's say, for training your line managers, and you don't feel like your organization really sees the link, I felt that something like this helps you maybe connect it. So if you know that your line managers know how to set good and clear goals, and they know how to give good quality feedback and recognition, and they understand their people, so they want to get the best out of them, that's almost your foundation. That's your starting point. Then something that maybe as people professionals you can do is agree, maybe by consulting with them, what does good people and performance management look like in our organization? Is it we speak to people weekly? Is it monthly? Is it quarterly? How has it changed due to remote working? What are our new ways of working? And I'll come back to that, because I think the rule book needs to be re-established and managers need to be involved in it. And how can we do this in a way which is transparent, fair, and builds trust? So that's, I've called that quality people management. Again, I'd say this was always best practice, but in a remote work environment, that's even more important. And then you're going to be starting to drive something which is much more like a high performance culture. Engagement would be another term you could use there, because if people feel engaged in the classic way in which they know what's expected of them, they've got opportunities to do their best, you are going to help them perform. And that in turn will drive organizational performance. So you can see that going bottom up. And you could also see it going, let's say, top down. So if you're in an organization where the way for you guys to perform out of this crisis, a key driver has got to be customer retention, so understanding what your strategic goals are, you'd want to make sure that your managers were setting goals to people and recognizing and rewarding performance that was supporting customer retention. It sounds really obvious, but it's amazing how disjointed organizations can be. So seeing that on a page, you can see how the culture can be driven up and down, and you join everything up and align it. So that's the sort of established performance, what drives performance over the long term from the literature, and a common sense approach to linking it to a high performance culture, and how perhaps you can help managers, those who hold the purse strings in your organization, see how these things are connected. But then let's think about what's the impact of remote working. And we know that we've been through lockdown where it was 100% remote working, and we're now moving into a stage where it's possibly hybrid, which could be even more complicated. So if I was to look at this, these are some of the challenges that previous attendees on webinars have told us. So they've said that there's a much less informal interaction, so that can reduce creativity, information sharing. People perhaps don't ask for help so easily. We might have less visibility of inputs, or maybe outputs, interestingly, but less visibility of what people are doing. Now, that's not necessarily a problem if we're talking about less presenteeism, but it's harder to see what people are doing, and therefore managers have got to work harder to identify and recognize what people are doing well. In some cases, there's been isolation. I think also if people have been locked down on their own, so they may really have lost that sense of team. And again, we've got to work harder to try and find ways of bringing that back. I certainly feel that my energy is better now we're not in lockdown. There was a stage where I felt that every day was so monotonous, and definitely that was definitely an impact. Yeah, I agree, Jarlath. I think we started off with that you can absolutely have too much, if suddenly go digital presenteeism relates us to burnout. We have to find a new way of doing this. And Emma says that management has to be active rather than passive. 100%. I mean, I think maybe the passive thing was about thinking just because I can see you means I'm managing you. People would often say, oh, I don't need to do one-to-ones. I talk to my people all the time. Do you really? Saying hello and what was the football is not the same as giving people structure and guidance around performance. And maybe we just have to be a bit more clear on how to manage people better going forwards. So you can see all of those. Those were some of the challenges that have been introduced by remote working. Nevertheless, lots of people reported that they had actually been more productive in that kind of environment. There might have been challenges, but it didn't necessarily mean that they weren't performing. And lots of people don't want to go back to 100% working environment. So I'm going to give you guys a poll. And I'm interested now we're in this stage where we're out of lockdown. We're in this maybe hybrid stage, but you have the opportunity, I imagine most people on here have the opportunity to remote work. And we'll put a poll up. And how do you think about remote working? Do you think you're more productive? Do you think it's about the same as it was pre-lockdown? Or do you think you're less productive with a predominantly remote working setup? And it's all anonymous, but it's really useful to get this. And we try and grab screen grabs of these polls so that we can share them with you. I'm going to show you some previous ones. It's useful to see how we feel we're going with this. So keep going, guys. We've got 75% of you have managed to vote. It was good to give it a few more seconds to do that, and then we'll share the results in a moment. Just over 80%. Any more of you going to vote? I'm just grabbing a sip of water. Okay, so we've got 81%. Let's go for it, Helen. Let's stop it there and see what people said. So 44% said that their productivity is about the same, 41% feel they're more productive, and 15% feel they're less productive. Now, feel free if you've got any context you want to add in there, whether they're more productive or less productive, because I'm conscious it's school holidays and we've still got kids at home. So I wonder, for example, if you said less productive, is that because you are not able to collaborate with people, or is it because of the environment that you're in or other things? So feel free to add any context that you have. If you're more productive, why is that? Less distractions? If you're about the same, did you always homework? Feel free to add that in the chat and we'll get the context. And I'll keep going though to share some previous polls that we've had with people. And you've got these, haven't you, Helen? I can get rid of this. You'll screenshot it.
Yes, I've got it.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so this is just something we asked on a previous one, just for context, and I'll come back and look at your chat. On a previous webinar, we talked to people about what was their biggest people management challenge, managing people during lockdown. And there was a multiple choice there. People were able to choose more than one. And you can see that actually energy really become a big challenge. I think certainly as we got sort of to month 3 and stuff with that. But people finding the focusing people, staying connected, performance issues, there was a really mix. All those other things were challenges that people identified with. And then we asked people during lockdown, did we spend more, less time with people? Now I saw this, that 56% felt they spent more time talking one-to-one with people, and I would say that was the case here. So I think that's probably the right thing to do. What I don't know is whether or not we have to spend more time permanently, or was that maybe that we needed to do that anyway, but we pretended we were talking one-to-one with people when we were in the workplace, but we were actually just sort of alongside them. We saw that almost 40% felt they set and reviewed short-term goals. They did more and some did the same. So it was quite even, but again, quite an uplift I felt there in terms of setting and reviewing short-term goals. And I'd say that I did more there in my experience there, just keeping people focused. And also I think because times were changing so quickly, the focus was moving, so we had to keep connected. And did we deal more, same or less performance issues? And that was about the same, was the majority there. I'm just going to quickly look at yours. So some of you feel you were more productive at the start, and maybe it started to become slightly less productive as time goes on. Less distractions, yes, yep. Motivation and momentum was a challenge. Harder to be creative and collaborative. It is hard to bounce ideas off people, Samantha, isn't it, when you're at home in a creative environment? But some people also feel, I mean, I think if you've previously homeworked, you can feel that you're getting more done. But there, Sarah's saying, I get more done, but feel a bit less fulfilled. So we want to, we're social people, that we want to get that balance, don't we, in there. So it's a new world, but there's definitely upsides that we have to this as well in terms of there. So you can obviously read through the comments for yourselves more easily than I can, because I've got a thumbnail-sized chat on my screen. The other point, which I thought was really relevant, was this point about trust, and that came through on that chat really significantly. Many of you talked about trust driving performance, and it really has come to the fore. I think the people who are coping with this, it's made a big difference there, and you can see that most people felt, or of those we asked, there was about 80 or 90 people I think on this particular call. It was a single choice response. 62% of those on the call, 48 people, felt that high trust generates high productivity. I think that's really interesting, because that is really a sign of the times. 20 years ago, it was quite low trust. People, if we'd had the technology, I don't think the mentality there was there to allow people to work remotely. There were definitely concerns, but people have stepped up to it, and also want to be productive. 21%, however, felt that high trust was unrelated to productivity, so they would be productive whether they were trusted or not. I interpret it as that. And there are a few, just a small number, but this is where you have this sort of 80-20 rule, where some of these people are fearful, I guess, because they think that low trust links to low productivity. There. Oh, sorry, high trust. No, that's the wrong one. High trust generates low productivity. The two people there who thought that, which I thought, oh, that's interesting. It's just that couple of people you're worried about that perhaps wouldn't perform. So anyway, I thought that was interesting in terms of the trust impact, and the fact that is something that's so key. And I I'm saying something actually that I quite enjoy working on. I've written an ebook, which will be a free ebook. It'll be on our website. And if you keep an eye out on your emails, you're obviously on mailing list because you've come on this webinar. We'll make it available to people who've been on before. It's just with the graphic designer being turned into a PDF. I took a lot of the information that we've gathered from these webinars and the feedback that we've gathered from people over the last 4 or 5 months and pulled it into an ebook, which is about virtual people and performance management. So I've come up with the acronym PERFORM, which I was fairly pleased with. I'll explain what it means to you. I don't think it's rocket science, but it might be something that's useful for your people managers or yourselves if you're a people manager. So the first one is about putting people first. So this is what I believe in terms of virtual performance management that's slightly different from when we were in the workplace. I think we could get away in the workplace with being more transactional. With virtual people management, we are potentially, some people, as you're saying, are a little bit starved of human interaction. Therefore, as a line manager, it's really vital to have that personal touch up front. Make sure that you know your team, that you know you care about them, and it's a much more human-centric relationship. If we do that and show that we trust people, and that might be take Friday afternoon off. You've clearly been working, you're exhausted. The other day, it was so hot, I couldn't work in the afternoon. I said to my guys, just give up. There's no point sitting at your computer and struggling. Just have a break if you need to. So trusting people, putting them first, that is a priority for my mind about a people management culture and being an effective virtual people manager. The second one, clarity of goals and short-term milestones. So that, when we talked at the start, we know that goals and objectives are really important, but I think slightly shorter term goals are more important when we're working remotely. And follow it up with regular review. Virtual is absolutely fine, but it needs to be consistent. We need to keep reviewing and keeping track of those things. People need feedback and development, and they might be out of sight, but we know that they need to be given constructive feedback what they're doing right so that they can carry on doing that right, particularly when they're working remotely. If they're not doing it right, they also need to know what they're doing and be given corrective feedback so that, again, they can carry on working effectively remotely. We have to stay connected with people, particularly if they're doing something new in this virtual workplace, because you don't want people to put so much effort into something and then it not be correct. And it's so unfulfilling if they've put their heart and soul in something. So all of those are classic good people management. But as we said earlier, that doesn't mean it's happening all that well. It doesn't mean that our people managers actually have good skills at doing this, because they were probably not doing it in the workplace prior to moving remotely. So all of these may be development areas for your line managers. Ownership. So for me, that ownership, empowerment, that came through a lot in the feedback you guys said at the start, helping people to take ownership for their goals, because if they take ownership for it and they've got clarity, then they're much more likely to achieve it. And also, if you coach them to define that goal or objective, then you both know that you're on the same page. If you tell someone what that objective is, there's a much higher chance that person might misinterpret it. Recognition. So that whole thing, it's not necessarily about reward, it's about recognizing, give people positive feedback, inspire them, help them to raise the bar, but catch people doing things right. Find a way of sharing recognition virtually so you get that good feeling within your organization and that visibility that's not present in the workplace. And then finally, managing performance. We still need to manage underperformance, not with the view that people are intentionally doing it, but catch people, help them to understand if their performance isn't on track and help them to perform. It is my view that most people want to do their best, and often it's about a lack of clarity as to why people don't perform. In a remote environment, there's room for clarity to be lost. So we just have to be better at managing performance proactively and positively. So if that might help your organization, again, it's classic, I'd say, management 101, but with a totally virtual spin on it. There'll be an ebook available, and we'll let you know when that's out in the next couple of weeks, and could be useful for the guys in your team. So moving on from this, I am interested to hear, on that basis, we've talked about the skills that are needed, the skills that will help us succeed. So people, in order to know what's expected, do we need to tell people what the strategy, we're talking here about culture, how can we drive a high performance culture if we don't know what high performance is for the business? Is it about objectives and milestones? What do you think your line managers, it could be yourself, or if you're, a training person, I know we've got learning and development people, what if you're thinking about the businesses that you work in, and I think you can do more than one. We said multiple choice, so you can choose up to 3. Which do you think are the key management skills that if you were to develop your people, you'd put most effort into developing, that would give you the greatest bang for your buck in these hybrid virtual working times? And I'll let you think about it a little bit more. So I think most of them speak for themselves: structured and regular follow-up, recognition, knowing people as individuals. That's for me about understanding what makes that individual tick. So one person might be motivated by stretching targets, the other person might be motivated by helping others, so you might buddy them up with somebody. Just knowing people as to what motivates them and treating them personally. Greater virtual, these are new ones, but in virtual team building or development, given that people are feeling a bit remote, do we need to do more there or get better at finding out ways in which we can collaborate? Or talent management and development. There is a school of thought that says that if people are so remote, we can't help them, we may not have that visibility of them, and they may not get the talent, the opportunities that they might have previously had. So do we need to find better ways of dealing with that, and managers become better at doing it? So we're up to 72% have voted. If you'd like to just cast your vote now, let's see if we can get up to 80% again, and then we'll share the results. 2 or 3 more seconds. 77%, come on. One more person, pretty good. 79%, 80%, well done. Up we go. So that's, hang on, still going. Last choices. I'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll share. So let's see what you said. So again, what we're saying actually is fairly even. So maybe that was quite as hard to choose. So across the board, you're saying that potentially your managers would benefit from these, but objectives and feedback. And I suppose that's an interesting one. If you want to put it in the chat, is that because objectives and feedback is most likely to drive high performance, or is that because you see that as relatively a gap compared to the others in your organizations? Interested if you went for that there. You say we can't vote for them all, Diane. Yeah, well, you can. Well, I mean, that's the thing. Actually, the reality is we probably do. And Meg said clear objectives. I'm just reading that. Home data science. Yeah, feel free to add more context, guys, if you want to. So it does seem that definitely we need to do that. Shoot them. Sue says, I wouldn't put feedback further at the top. I think there's too much of that. It feels like a lack of trust. That sounds like how you do it, isn't it, though, I'd have thought? Isn't it about support? So maybe I'm thinking feedback would be about recognizing people doing things right. That good old-fashioned 1-minute manager, catch people doing things right, is like, that's recognition, I guess, in fairness, isn't it? It is about volumes too, I agree. And it's also about sincerity, which someone said earlier too. And then I've got a follow-up question here, because as I think it was Mel said on the chat, that many businesses don't see themselves fully going back into the organization. And the people I'm talking to, they do not see our business. We won't go straight back into everything. What do you see as the next set of performance challenges in a semi-virtual world? Because I'm thinking, I think where we're going to go to is a sort of hybrid working environment where you may have to try and get people to go in 1 day a week in small groups, a bit like this bubbles concept with schools. So interested to see, where do you see the big challenges, as in what are we going to have to be trying to help our organizations with in the next 3 months? And what are you kind of struggling with, scratching your head with at the moment? So is it about energy? Do you feel that energy levels are still low down? Is it about not enough informal collaboration? How can we put that back? If we're not going to have the water cooler moments, how do we manage to create that? Disjointed availability or working hours. I'm seeing that happens a bit, because when people are just going in 1 day a week, how do you line up the day a week to see people? Is it about productivity? Is it about loss of team ethos and spirit? Cohesion. Will this impact on our company culture? Our lack of cohesion, people feeling isolated, mean that we lose people? So that was worried about loyalty and things, and talent visibility and retention affecting career development or career progression. So interested in those. So these are the things that you're scratching your head as we look to the future. One of the reasons I'm asking you this is that we're going to do a webinar on this into September, because I've already been asked to do a facilitation with a client on this topic as to how do we solve these problems. I don't know the answer off the top of my head, so any ideas you've got, but I think collaborating like this is going to be a great way in which we can share ideas and help each other to come up with an effective new working environment. So I've got 69% of you. You can go for up to 3. Let's see if we can get to 80% again and see what everyone's saying. Then we'll share the results and you can see whether your headaches are the same as the other people on this call. And so we've got 72 people still on the call, so it's still quite a number. Good to see the chat as well. I like it when I see you chatting to each other. It's brilliant. Do feel free to reach out to each other if you can. I can't share contact details, but you can look each other up on LinkedIn if you see that you've got things that would connect. And some people have said where they work at the top, so you could look them up. 76%. Keep going. Let's get up to 80% if we can. You can go for 2 or 3. Which challenges do you think have you got going forwards? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Brilliant. 84% have voted. So let's share the results, Helen. So lack of informal collaboration is the top one, or that, as in 67% of you feel that, yes, affecting sharing or creativity and other things, and morale, I suppose. Lack of morale, energy for isolation. Not so many with disjointed working hours. That's good. Team ethos and spirit. So I'd say it's looking like collaboration, having that team spirit, and maybe the energy, maintaining energy. But we've also got coming up here culture and talent visibility coming up in the rear too. So there's plenty of things that we're going to need to look at, aren't there? So the practical next steps, I was trying to come up with some practical next steps, and I will give more thought into this and welcome any other suggestions that people have got. And I think that's it, I've thought I've gone too far. My suggestion is try and make a business case to find a way to train/educate your managers to raise their game with performance management, as in remote performance management. If you give them the ebook, it's coming up, which is free. Also, if you are HR Uprising listener, I'm going to translate the ebook into, there will be a series of line manager podcasts. So all of this is free. So podcasts that will be going out, turning that in a podcast. So those are sort of things. Keep an eye out for what's out there that's free, that you can encourage your line managers to educate themselves to be effective at remote performance management. By all means, train them as well. Get everybody to reflect on the levels of trust and empowerment within your organization, how you can increase those, and what behaviors you're demonstrating that are demonstrating trust and empowering people, and vice versa, because those that makes an awful lot of difference. And some managers don't realize, I mean, someone commented on the chat that too much feedback can feel like a lack of trust. So it is about the individual as well. Can you make feedback and recognition, certainly positive feedback, more visible? Have you got a system that you can share it and shout it so people feel part of something? On team calls, can you get people to give a shout out for those person who's helped them? Think about how that can be something that becomes more of a cultural habit, maybe through the virtual calls that are taking place. Get people to use collaboration technology informally. We have got more Skype groups than you can shake a stick at in our organisation, and I know lots of other people use other tools. It doesn't matter which one it is, but getting people, we've got one which is to do with, it's called Sharpen the Saw at the moment, which is to do with a team wellbeing competition. And yeah, the biggest chat today was about the rain on the M1. So it's just getting people to have that kind of informal chats, the sort of thing that you might have said as you walked past someone's desk, getting them to have those chats as well. Try and encourage there to be a cadence of company communication. Make sure there isn't a drought of it. I realised that we used to only do quarterly face-to-faces. I now do a monthly. We did every 2 weeks during lockdown, and we now do a monthly social, and we do a monthly team communication, and everyone communicates in it. So at least you've got a cadence. By that I mean, if you're a larger organisation than ours, then it gets passed down so that everyone feels communicated with and up to speed. Team timetables seems to be something you can do for safe office attendance. So you can't have everyone back in at once, but make sure that everybody knows what day it is and try and align it so that people do get to have that face-to-face. That rota, Mel saying we've done a rota, is it? Same sort of thing. So you're trying to get that there, and maybe now is the time. We've been very transactional over the last 4 or 5 months. as things normalise, there could be those people who felt isolated, left out by their manager, who may just feel, actually, I'm going to look somewhere else. Now's the time to think also about how can we develop people in a virtual way and have visibility of it. So those are just some ideas that we've come up with, and as I have more, we'll share them. Love to hear in the chat ideas. I love the ideas that people are sharing already. Please feel free to share any ideas you've got or you've done already. So Mel is saying they've got a rota which has one day a team together day, so you're rotating it. Any of those ideas might work for you, or anything you're doing that is working. We had something about buddying on one of the wellbeing calls I did. People were assigned a buddy and they'd chat with them once a week and things like that, just to have that human contact going. So please do feel free and to share what you might have come up with, and I'll keep an eye on those coming through. Always seems to be a bit of a delay on my chat as it comes through. And I'm just going to give you a couple of summary slides. So a team picnic, what a great idea, Diane. Rather than Zoom, it is challenging, isn't it, get face to face, but that sounds great. Team picnic's lovely. Just flagging this, you might see it on there. If you are interested in knowing more about change, I'm running a virtual change superhero program. It was going to be a one day. It's a virtual one, as you'd imagine. So it's modular. You get free 360 feedback. You get a group coaching. You'll be part of a cohort of like-minded people, and we've got 50% early bird discount available. So there'll be a link to that if you want to read more about it. I will be personally hosting it. You get a free copy of my book, and it will be really relevant to the stuff we're doing here. If you're trying to build a sort of culture, you want a bit more clarity on how to practically do it, that's what that will be about. And I'll come back to your Zoom comments in a moment as well. Just letting you know, the future webinars, I run 2 a month. The way I'm emphasizing them now is I do one aimed at people professionals like this. So this is much more cultural, it's high level. And I'll also do ones which you can point your line managers at. You're very welcome to attend as well. So we're going to do one about actually how would you deal with performance issues virtually. That's going to be next week. Just going through a kind of performance management 101, putting a line in the ground, understanding the causes of underperformance. So that's a little bit of training if you've got line managers that need it. The link will be on the show notes when we go out. And then Thursday, the 10th of September, I'm going to do some more research. I'm going to take the feedback that you're giving us and think about how do we adapt to the challenges of a hybrid workplace, because it's now moved out to lockdown. What sort of things can we do to deal with that? So that will be the webinar aimed at people professionals on the 10th of September. So that's our schedule. I'm just going to move it through. As I said, we will send you the slides. We'll send you a link to the recording as well. It may not come till tomorrow because we have to get it off Zoom. But you've got, oh, great, well done, Helen. You've got all of the links also in the Zoom chat. Please link in with me. If we're not already linked in, think about joining our HR Uprising LinkedIn group. And I'm going to have a look here at some of the things that you guys are saying. So we had team picnic. Thank you, by the way. If anyone needs to drop off, I'm conscious that you may have to go on to other things. Really appreciate your time. So Fred's saying they're already on roster, so there's 2 people in the staff at office at all time. Do you have the same 2 people or does it change? That'd be interesting. Team breakfast, virtual, of course. And actually just little socials like that. It is nice to do that there. Meg says managers need to be confident using technology. Do you know what? We've really had to get used to that quite quickly, using things like meeting rooms and things as well, aren't they? But I believe that remote working is here to stay, and what we do need to, and actually it should be, because we can be more productive, but we need to ensure that we gain more than we lose. And many people think it would be retrograde to go back completely to exactly how we were. Ian says we've started shout outs, stick with those in development champions. What's a shout out? Is that a shout out saying thank you to people, Ian? Is that what you're saying? Nice how-to virtual guide. Well done, Francesca. Half an hour coaching catch up with each team member on a weekly basis, people led. Brilliant. Great. So lovely to see your fantastic ideas out there. Thank you so much for joining. Feel free to give me any questions if you've got any suggestions for what would be useful next week. They do change where the other 2 work from home. Yeah, Fred, that's nice. So you get to have a bit of mix of people, don't you? Friday morning toast. Yeah, this is it. So lots of things you can move online, can't you? And there are benefits, especially we need to encourage people to use some of that time they're not spending commuting to use that for other beneficial well-being before it gets cold and well, it's turned wet, but for make sure we get into those habits of actually going out and walking and doing something physical as well. So thanks so much for attending. I'm going to close this down unless any questions come through.